Thank you very much, Curtis. As from the introduction, my name is Adrian Bridge. I live and work in Porto. I run a business called the Flaggate Partnership, and we started with Taylor's Port back in 1692. So I'm in a sort of family wine business, somewhat traditional. And kind of my experience here is having created a number of wine tourism experiences. And I'm going to give you just a few numbers that also show how that perhaps has had some economic benefit to our business, and also, in fact, to the city. So the purpose of this, obviously, is how do we attract new consumers? And obviously, what I want to really start with is kind of what we mean by wine tourism. A lot of things here to read. I want to make 2 points. Most people are talking about wine tourism today in the sense of just getting people to the winery. And in many ways, a lot of wine companies tend to think of wine tourism as purely an extension of what might be happening here at ProWein. In other words, if you've got a tasting table or a tasting booth, wine tourism is pretty much the same. But there's another thing that I would like to call attention to, and that is the word tourism. I strongly don't believe today we're talking about tourists. Tourists tend to go to places where they go there simply for what they can take away from it. Today, I think we're talking much more about travelers. So if you go back to, centuries, go back to before mass tourism, before cheap flights that started in 1970, people went for longer holidays. They went and they explored, they experienced, they interacted culturally with the destination. And it's that traveler that's seeking out of an experience that is extremely important and is a key point to think about, because it makes one think about what one has to deliver to those visitors. I'm going to just put up a couple of quick slides here, and I'm not trying to do this in too academic a way, but simply to make a point that in the wine industry, we're a primary economic activity. In other words, we tend to be price takers. We're all about long-term capital growth. We're a homogeneous product. That means basically we're quite interactive. That's why we're price takers. And the supermarket says they need to buy a wine at €5, and they're going to fill that slot at €5 from somebody. If it's new, it's somebody else. Whereas when you get into tourism, you're in a tertiary economic activity, and that tends to be price makers. The example of that would be, if a hotel sets its rates at €300, that's what you're going to pay to stay in that hotel. That's what you're going to pay. The alternative is sleeping on the pavement. They are able to basically make that demand. And so, despite the fact that tourism, tends to be, we can often consider it to be pretty much the same. A hotel actually all has the same function, but there's very different layers and very different layers of pricing. The point about that actually is also at a consumer level, consumers actually understand the difference between these two. It's much easier for a consumer to identify the difference between a motel and a 5-star super luxury hotel, more than it is between one glass of red wine and another glass of red wine. And that's something that we need to always remember in our heads. Why is this important? This is important that as a winery goes into wine tourism, enotourism, engaging with that visitor, engaging with that traveler, it's a different business. It has different ways to be controlled. It needs different ways of thinking about it. However, and this is the point of this slide, if you're a core wine business, you're making wine, that's fine. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good business to be in. The steps that companies tend to take, the ancillary activities might be opening a tasting room, a winery shop, and so on. You're just extending that to the people who are coming to visit your property. But very often we tend to move even further out of this, which is getting into these auxiliary businesses. So we start opening restaurants. In our particular case, we also have hotels. We actually also have a transportation service, because we have a little ferry that crosses the River Douro to bring people from one side to the other to get them closer to us in the middle of the city. Interestingly, I put the government around the side of this, because their responsibility when it comes to this is all about infrastructure, utilities, transport, education, and so on and so forth. Many, many times we find, for political reasons, local mayors want to jump right into the tasting room and winery business simply because it's happening in their region. And that's something that I think, as wine industry, we always need to guard slightly against. But anyway, so this is just some more statistics, looks at what people are motivated to travel with. And broadly speaking, traveling, restaurants, these tend to be, in most generations, primary activities that people are driving towards. It's what people are thinking about. Let's face it, we eat 3 times a day. We sleep every night. We want to go and explore. We are sociable animals, so we like to interact. These, therefore, logically becomes things that drive a lot of human activity. And I want to just try to, zoom this down into my local area, which is Porto, northern Portugal. Now, bearing in mind you've got 2 different scales here, although I've kind of overlaid them between the Douro, which is the city on the Atlantic coast, which is very much the gateway to the region, and then the Douro, which is the wine region itself. Okay, and you can see that these have pretty much been tracking. An interesting point might be to note that in the Douro, during the COVID period, that actually accelerated more than we had in the local city, and that was because you had the local people wanting to go and explore their countries and explore the local wine region, and that was something that we saw. We opened a hotel in 2010. It's called the Yeatman. It was the first really tourist visitors hotel in the city of Porto. The city of Porto is a destination that was primarily an industrial destination. People were coming for business, and you can see this. Best hotel in town in 2005, 6, when I started the Yeatman project, was the Sheraton. It basically did well in April, did well in October. The whole of the summer months completely empty. We went out there and built a hotel that was for visitors, people coming because we thought they'd be interested to come to the city, learn about port, learn about wine. So the logic was they were interested in port, interested in wine. If they're interested in port and wine, they're interested in good food. So the whole point was to create something that was specifically promoting the destination. And we launched this project under defining the destination. So it was all about getting people to the city. And that's been hugely successful. You see that reflected in our own numbers, but we see that now right across the city. And we've stimulated, by virtue of what we've done, a huge amount of activity in hotel construction, restaurant construction, so on and so forth, which has been good for the overall city. You can look here, ADRs, you can see there, the business hotel with a very constant business pricing, something dedicated to tourism and travels with very different ADRs and very different activity. If I look simultaneously at what we've done in our own visitor centres, you can see here that growth. So people coming to the city, discovering the city, and then coming in to discover about port. Now, bearing in mind, the city of Porto does not have any vineyards. Okay, we're in the city. The vineyards are literally 2 hours further up the Douro. And you can see that in here with the Douro numbers, which have grown, but they've grown at a slower pace because they are somewhat further away. And broadly speaking, most consumers feel they need a higher degree of wine knowledge in order to go and visit in the vineyard, whereas when they're in the city, when it's just an activity that they can walk in and out of, they don't feel quite so intimidated, and therefore we're seeing more people coming in. And bearing in mind, you've got here with the number of visitors to our outlets touching on about 200,000 people just to our visitor centres for our port businesses. And just to give you an example here of some of the positives that this throws up, and I've got a couple of examples here, American, but I'll take the Korean example. A number of Koreans that have come to visit us consistently have grown. It's not surprising if I tell you that the sales of Taylor's Port in Korea have actually also grown at a similar rate. And we've created a self-reinforcing circle. Why is that important? Obviously, there is commercial benefits from them coming to visit us, but also commercial benefits in our sales. However, the important point to remember is that when that consumer who has a perception of the brand actually comes to visit, the brand needs to be consistently positioned. And very often I've seen wineries who've got into the process of enoturism where they haven't particularly thought things through. And that may be as simple as being very pro-sustainability, everything's green in how they explain things, and yet in the winery it's plastic chairs, plastic tabletops, plastic bottles of water, and so on and so forth, which is inconsistent with their brand positioning. But the commercial positive loop is very important. There you are, you can see the growth there in numbers on that market. Very quickly, if I've still got time, I'm going to touch on the world of wine. This is what the city looked like before the hotel was built in 2010. This is now what we look like. So all this construction, all this process has actually been Adrian playing with Lego bricks, building something, not only the hotel, but having built the hotel and got people to the city, the next question is, what are they going to do when they're there? I think for a sustainable tourism industry, you need content. Content is key, but content that is differentiated. So if every winery does exactly the same thing, you'll only ever have a limited amount of activity in the region. But if between you, some guys doing the wine with chocolate, another with wine with cheese, another one's doing horse riding, another one has got parking slots for caravans in the vineyards. This is how working together, it makes a huge impact. And the wine industry typically is not very good at actually working together. I mean, we tend to be, a very zero-sum game industry. And I found that certainly with the Porto Protocol, that actually getting people to share their secrets, sharing their research has been a challenge. Anyway, here, Content King, we then converted a whole lot of warehouses to something called the World of Wine. It was a fairly big project. It was 110 million investment, which was a fairly substantial one. But I did it at scale because I wanted to change the city, not simply to affect us, but also have an impact on all of that region of the city. So this was very much a catalyst for urban development. And when we put the content in there, we had a wine experience, which is quite serious, but we then had a Pink Palace, which is a lifestyle expression of rosé. It's Instagram driven. We had a chocolate museum and experience, so people can learn everything about chocolate, but then they can taste wine and chocolate and do workshops. Something about the history of the city and the region. So these are all things that have come together: a wine school, retail, and so on and so forth. So this has been a fairly major project, including a gallery, or two galleries. We're just about to do a show this summer on Picasso and Matisse. So every year we're doing new gallery shows, primarily to create more content, more things for press to talk about, bringing more footfall to the region. And here you can see the sort of some of the footfall we've seen in the last few years post-COVID really picking up. So we're getting 1.5 to 1.7 million people through. This year we should top over 2 million people that are coming through the world of wine. Bearing in mind, as I said, it's a cultural district, so it covers something like 50,000 square meters, so a fairly large size project. And this just gives you a few pictures of it. So here, for me, the key factors: memorable, differentiate from competition, alignment of the brand and the brand values, hugely important, something that people often get wrong. Inclusive innovation. When we do the wine tour, the Pink Palace, which is all about tasting in stations, we have actually different drinks for children so that they can do it. They can also get involved in the tasting. It's non-alcoholic, it's a fruit drink, but nonetheless they feel involved and part of that whole family experience. Authenticity, hugely important. And then really this point about thinking about the guest, the customer needs, what they're looking for, what they're trying to achieve. These are crucial points in terms of things to think about.
Okay, perfect timing. 15 minutes goes, perfect. So now we will initiate a small discussion, but please raise your hands if anyone has questions, just for me to plan timing. Okay, just one. Okay, maybe you will have more while we will talk. We will...
There's a microphone coming.
Yeah? Okay.
Thank you very much. Could you share some more experience about the wellness and spa and the wine tourism?
Yeah, with pleasure. Actually, what we realized is that visitors are looking for something which is not so. Especially nowadays, health and wellness became so important that there is no way to avoid this. Yeah, and also the wine industry is affected by this. So if you have the chance to offer something where the visitors have the feeling that this is good for me, good for my health, then they have a completely other way of thinking, so they don't have a bad consciousness when they did sport, and after they did sport, they try some wines. So this is let's say, the consciousness is in balance. Yeah, that's the reason it's important. And you can imagine all kind of sporty activities, wellness activities, what you can do. There was always a short list of different activities like hiking, bicycling, and all of these things. But you can combine this also with other things. Again, the most important thing is doing something for your health, and then you are more happy to drink a wine, and you don't have bad conscience.
Yeah, we've had an example. For example, the Yateman, which is it's a wine hotel. It actually promotes all Portuguese wines. So each bedroom is actually sponsored by a wine producer. But when we created the spa, logically we created a wine spa. In fact, I teamed up with Caudalie in order to have wine-based products and wine-based treatments, because that was a very consistent positioning for a wine hotel. That might seem logical, but there's plenty of hotels in wine regions that don't even think about including, wine spa treatments in their offering.
So this is important.
I think it's very important. We won Best Hotel Spa Western Europe twice, and I think the reason we won, apart from being very good, but the reason we won was because we were differentiated and we were consistent with the positioning of the hotel. And that creates for the consumer that logical journey. They're going for the experience. There's various different touch points. It's not just the winery visit. It's not just the Michelin-starred meal that they might have, or the tasting they're doing with the sommeliers, but it's also in that touch point in the spa, and even in the contents of what's in the shops we have, which would be something that might be more appealing to people who are interested in wine. It makes logical sense that one's positioned that way. So it's about consistency and consistency of offer. And I think when you look at it as a regional basis, so what an individual company can do one thing, but I look at what our neighbors are doing, because if they're all going to be doing too much of the same, then I need desperately to be differentiated. I'll give you a fantastic example in South Africa. I don't know if anyone in here has been to Babylon Storen, which I think is a fabulous place. It's got wines, it's got food, they make candles, they grow lavender. Opposite, there's I think a llama petting place. There's a farm in amongst the wineries where you go there, you learn about llamas, you feed them food, you buy llama socks made from llama wool. The kids love it. I mean, it makes the whole journey out there a completely different experience. And that's where, from a strategic perspective in a region, it's absolutely crucial. In my view, you have differentiated content.
Let me add another example, just coming back to your question. I visited, I think 2 or 3 years ago, a winery in our region where our university is located in Rheingold. And I entered this winery, and it was a Sunday morning, and 50 ladies were around in the garden, and then prepared themselves or whatever, And then I asked the manager, and the people doing here? He said, it's yoga session. So combining, they have normally wine and yoga has nothing to do with each other, right? But it's became pretty sexy in the last few years. And the question is, of course, do they drink wine before, during, or after? Probably all three, occasions. But also this one, combining well-being, and then after that another kind of well-being, in terms of wine.
Thank you. Any questions? Yeah, we have two.
Can I ask about, do you notice any trends geographically? Tourism trends for wineries in Australia versus, say, France versus Chile versus Virginia?
Adrian, you can start.
The point I would make, there's been studies done elsewhere in the world. I know there were studies done in Australia which actually looked at the number of wineries that people will go and visit, and it ends up at less than 3. So, one of the things for me when I built the World of Wine, there were 17 different port lodges, all offering the same thing. And realistically, and that goes to my point about being able to build sustainable tourism business, as in something that is economically sustainable as opposed to purely environmentally, but economically sustainable, you need that differentiation. And it's surprisingly consistent when you talk to consumers. So although they did that academic study 15, 20 years ago in Australia, we have exactly the same experience when we do those feedback studies. And we just did a major study on the world of wine, looking at through tagging the data of people coming to our sites, our website, and what they were then going to go and looking at after having come onto our site. And we saw much more disproportionate interest in food, recipes, than we saw actually in wine. So it was kind of an interesting, again, that wasn't totally surprising. We know, actually, just as a very, in parenthesis if I may, the CRM work that we're doing now is certainly designed also to help people make those bookings before they arrive in the destination. Because if you can sell to someone before they've arrived, you're probably going to get them to turn up. When you go to many regions and everybody's doing exactly the same thing, they may never get to you because you're literally, the fourth in a row and they only ever go to 3. So that pre-arrival booking we found to be hugely, hugely important and something to think about.
And try to answer your question from another perspective. What we realize is that depending on the target group, depending on people, the potential circle of people who will visit your winery, the strategies are different. Yeah. In the new world, completely other strategies how to attract people, how to get people compared to the old world, let's say Europe. Yeah. In Germany and other European countries, it was always part of the normality that people visited the winery, came in, tasted some wines, and then if they like it, they bought someone and went home. Yeah, this is started approximately 25, 30 years ago in the new world, that they started extending the experience of wine tourism. And this is what even right now European wineries try to adapt to. So this is exactly what Gabriel said and what we stressed also before. Not only wine. Wine is a nice product. It should be a part of the wine tourism experience, but it's not the only thing. The people need something more. And this is, I think, this is what it's a kind of silence revolution in Europe. But a lot of wineries realize that it should be more than a glass of wine or a bottle of wine. And then they extended this experience by food, gastronomy, enjoyment, nature, things like this. So the next step is, again, what I show in my presentation, trying to invite more people, so that they have the chance to learn a little bit more about wine, or just bring the people a little bit closer to this product in an indirect way.
Can I just pick up on a point there? Yeah. So we don't have, I'm not very interested in cellar door sales. I know that makes it different to other parts of the world. I mean, in California, cellar door sales are hugely important. Because most of the people arriving in our city are coming, a lot of them now are coming on discount airlines. They're coming with only hand luggage. They therefore can't buy a bottle. So instead, we really don't focus on selling them a bottle. I'd rather tell them where they can get a bottle when they go home than try and sell them a bottle when they're there. But I will try and sell them a tasting, because not only can I create, it's much easier if you can create that whole moment, that tasting, that interaction. You can upsell them. People sit in the rose garden, they're sitting there, drinking with friends. Hopefully they then take that enthusiasm back with them and they become ambassadors. So I see our visitor centers, apart from being economically very viable, they're also making ambassadors for our business. And in parallel to that, what we did was create a wine bar, actually a wine bar and wine shop in the airport. So if they didn't buy from us, they didn't buy in duty free where we actually have a standalone shop. We then have a wine bar in the airport as well, and sell bottles that way. So we kind of try to catch them in all directions if we can.
Let me also ask one thing, because now one person did. Please.
Yeah, thank you. So maybe first, my first remark is to Adrian. The hotel you are leading was on my bucket list for all my life, and I'm working in wine since 20 years, and I didn't know that it was linked to wine, so how blonde am I? Sorry. And the second thing is to you, because I'm also in wine education, so my question is to all these winemakers which we educate in our universities, how important is it to learn about wine tourism?
So I'll answer the question on the Yateman. I tried to build a hotel for the city, so I didn't want to brand it to us. I was very conscious that if I branded it, the Yateman is an old family name. So that our company is called Taylor Fladgate Yateman. So Yateman is authentic, but it isn't specific. It's never been used for port. So I didn't want to tie it directly to a port because I wanted it to benefit the entire city. And that's why I went out to all the top producers in Portugal and asked them to sponsor bedrooms. And we've been doing wine dinners every Thursday night since September 2010, COVID aside. But we do a lot of wine events. We promote a lot of wine. We have 103 wines by the glass we have 2-star Michelin there. We have another restaurant as well. So we kind of try to bring food and wine all in together. But I never tried to sort of tie it to the winery because I think it's an asset for the region. If I can get more people to the region, we will benefit from it. In the same way, the world of wine, we spent 110 million on a project that's stimulated by now already over 700 million of investment in and around that area with new hotels. Now, there are people who are going to say, well, but what about over-tourism and all the other issues related to that? But and those are concerns that we must deal with. But the increase in tourism has accelerated the investment in the metro. There's created a lot of urban regeneration. There's a lot more restaurants. There's a lot more employment. These are all things that have created a much more positive ambience, not just for people coming to visit, but the people who live there. 30 years ago in Porto, there was probably one restaurant. We now have 2 stars, 4 1-stars, and about 30 odd that are Michelin recommended. That has been a massive transformation purely in 20 years.
So this hotel became today part of my bucket list. So you have a chance to visit it. But back to your question, thank you very much for this one. This is an essential question. And I would say, if you would ask me, I would say definitely yes. If you would ask someone else, I would say no. But at the end of the day, what counts is actually the exactly education. And I joined 2 years ago an UN tourism event. And this UN tourism event was about wine tourism education. We came together, I think 15 different experts from all over the world and spent there 2 days. And we ended up with a very sad result. And the result was there is a huge need, but there is no offer. And we try to bridge this gap. So we are planning in Geisenheim an English-speaking joint master in wine tourism and management. Hopefully we're going to start next year. Let's see, yeah. In a cooperation with other universities from Europe. And as you know, in Germany, there's a liberal way of studying. It will be an English-speaking master for free. Yeah, so we hopefully will attract a lot of students. But this is only one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is, what about those that are already active in the wine business, and they need a kind of executive education, right? So this is also what we try to organize worldwide. With different or bigger organizations, smaller organizations, local partners, international partners, to offer something like this. Another big thing is only 5 days. It's a kind of summer school, but again, for professionals, yeah? And we really do hope and do see a kind of huge need for this. So we're gonna do this in the future, in the near future. You are welcome to join.
Yeah, my take on education, and clearly it's an industry, we need to be professionals, we need to understand it. And, pure F&B operations versus winery operations, as I say, they're different industries, they're different businesses, and they take different levers to control them. However, we're a very strange industry in many, many ways, because, we want to educate consumers, And then as soon as we open their eyes to how magical wine is, we then ask them to be completely loyal to our brand. Don't try anybody else, just try, I've now taught you, just drink me. The answer is, all of us are in fact starting all of the consumers on a journey because we need to give them confidence. But we have to accept that as we educate them and give them that confidence, they'll go out and they'll try lots of things. But if we can break that barrier down, then I think we make wine much more accessible. And I think the one takeaway I would have normally when I think about the wine industry is that we work so hard to make it exclusive and difficult for people, when in fact, through tourists and so on, the entire objective is to do the opposite. Make it easy, make it fun, make it very inclusive, and be very gentle on the education, but guide people through, build their confidence, take them on an amazing journey, which is wine.
Okay. Any questions? No? So we discussed. Oh, sorry.
Hi. So I'm a bit more interested in safari and wine, and it feels like a lot of countries in Africa leave a lot of money on the table in that regard. What are your thoughts on that, and what do you think the trends are where you can go in that regard?
I mean, safari and wine is an interesting topic for sure. However, a little bit limited to a certain part of the world. In this case, African countries. But again, this is the same thing what we were talking about also in the last half an hour. Again, this is also extension of the wine tourism experience. Combine wine tourism with different other things. Yeah, this is the cross overcoming different limits and borders and combining different parts of the business. In this case, it's safari and wine. Why not? I mean, it's a nice offer. It's something what you could easily combine, and before or after or during the safari, you can drink also wine. It's not a question.
Yeah, I'd make a couple of points. I mean, clearly the in a lot of the F&B world, the thinking behind F&B managers is how to get the cheapest possible thing out there that will satisfy a client, without necessarily thinking of the whole holistic experience the client is going through. So you sometimes get quite indifferent wines on an amazing safari, and you go, this is inconsistent. And I would say, I'll give you an example, because place and where you are makes a big difference to your wine experience. I mean, I think we've all probably had that. We can all say, what's your favorite wine? You think, oh, I don't really know. I tasted this, I tasted that. But we can all probably think of a very memorable wine that actually was enhanced by the location we were at. I'll give you a really good example here. We had our 2003 vintage port. Robert Parker gave us 98 points, which is a reasonable score for a wine, okay? He was then about 6 months later on a dinner on the Great Wall of China where the wine was served, and actually on that night he gave it 100 points. So that was about location. So for me, if you think about being out in magical places in Africa with everything that you've got around, the middle of the Serengeti, doing the whole out of Africa scene, and there you've got fantastic wine, you're going to create extraordinary enhanced memories because of the totality of the experience. It's an important ingredient.
One more question. When I was in the USA, I saw a lot of member pubs in the wineries. I think this is not so popular in Europe. What do you think about the pub membership in the wineries? Is it outdated, or they still something?
Unfortunately, at least this is my experience, in Germany it doesn't work at all. Several wineries try to deal with this and introduce this kind of membership programs and so on. But again, loyalty, at least in Germany, is not so as strong that it could work. What we realized that, for example, and back to 2020, 2021, yeah, the deepest corona pandemic time, we conducted a survey in different countries, and among others also in Australia, New Zealand, and the US, California. And what we found out is wineries from these new world countries and regions, they were pretty successful selling wines in a very hard time, yeah, creating a kind of resilience with the help of these wine clubs, because they had the address, they had a direct communication with the members of this, and saved the situation. At the same time, we asked the same questions also in Europe. It was not even one winery they answered this question with yes. We have a positive relationship with consumers via wine clubs and things like this. In Europe, mainly prestigious, very high-level wineries, but again, this is not the case. This is, for me, this is also a very important part of wine tourism.
Is it?
It is. It is. And happy wineries, or the wineries, they are really, they could label themselves as happy when they have this program and when they have members of this, because it's a very valuable tool.
So I think it's got there's several aspects to this. So obviously it's a function of distribution. So you'll see that in Napa, you'll see that in South Africa, where a lot of people have wine clubs because they may not have access to wider distribution, and therefore they can probably satisfy their sales by purely having their own membership club. And if that's the objective, that's fine. If the other objective is to sort of disseminate wider information, so we, for example, do have a type of club that people can sign up to, but it's not in order to sell them wine. I'm not trying to sell them special offers on that. I'm trying to inform them recipes, information, travel, so on and so forth. You know, what we do at the winery is we have special products that are only available there. That's really point of sale type stuff. So that's a bit about people, if they want to feel part of the club, that they went there, they bought something that they couldn't buy elsewhere in the world. So I think it really comes down to objective. I mean, if I look, and I'll give you another example. We're probably running out of time, but I'll give you another example. So I'm involved in a wine company in the UK. So I'm an investor in a wine company called Chapeldown. Chapeldown went the full journey on this, because it actually then went out and got a group of people to invest in it. So there was a series of, the people bought shares and became owners. And then they get to go there, they can do special picnics in the vineyards, they can do special tours as an owner in inverted commas. They may only own 100 shares in a company that's got 100 million shares, but the point basically is that creation and sense of belonging for that winery worked to create ambassadors. And so suddenly they by bringing that approach, they had a huge number of ambassadors who felt absolutely engaged and involved, and it helped them to be successful. In return, they offer discounts, they offer something special that money can't buy otherwise. And I think so it is all about objectives, but the power that it can have to when you think about it non-transactionally, it's not about simply selling a box, but it is about creating an ambassador, I think can be very, very powerful.
In Europe?
We're in Europe.
In Europe, yes.
Yeah, I gave you an example. So we do it in Portugal, okay? And I gave you an example in the UK, which is still geographically in Europe, although they've got other ideas. But nonetheless, but that's good. We don't need to do it from a point of view of retail. So it's not a question of I need to do it because I can't ship my wines to France. If I'm in Napa, I need to do it because I can't ship my wines to Arizona. They have challenges that we don't necessarily have here. But that aside, it's again objective. What are you trying to achieve? But it's got a powerful place to play.
Okay, our time is over. I have around 100 questions prepared. I sent to both of them, and they couldn't choose what we're going to discuss in case there would be no questions. And we're very happy that there were so many questions today. So you are our audience, and we are here today for you. Thank you for all your questions. I hope you had a good time. Thank you so much for this amazing people, Sergey, Adrian, and we are all confident. Thank you.
We're a little bit jobless, but I think